Chip Lindsey, the 50-year-old coordinator coming in here to the University of Michigan, spent the last 2 years as the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach at North Carolina. He was the OC for Gus Malzahn at Auburn for a couple years, 2017, 2018. Same thing under Malzahn at UCF. He spent time at Southern Miss under Todd Monken. He was the OC at Arizona State. Head coach at Troy from 2019 to 21, was fired from that job after going under 500. But as a coordinator, he's got 8 years of experience, 4 of them at the power conference level. Has done some pretty good things. I mean, you look at points per game, 33, 34, 33, a lot of over 30, a lot of good quarterback play as well. So I think a pretty solid hire for Michigan here. There were different candidates out there. I think this one was one that people were fine with.
Yeah, he checked all the boxes, right? Of a guy with experience who's done it at a high level at more than one stop. He's not a flash in the pan because he's had success at different schools and done some good things. So he's 50 years old, which I think is too old for some of the young guys on our site that are, we wanted the young guy, we wanted Craddock or whatever. And but I wanted somebody with experience, somebody who has coached a quarterback like Bryce Underwood before, which he has clearly. And has gotten it done, not just one way or the other, but with both run and the pass. And we've seen him have offenses that have had great passing attacks. We've seen him have offenses that have had great running attacks, and seen him have offenses that are both. So not quite sure what people are expecting here or hoping for, but to me, this is what I kind of falls right into what I thought they would get. If not a Golden from Toledo, for example, then maybe a Chip Lindsey. So, you know what, willing to give anybody a shot. And there were a lot of people who were complaining about the Jesse Minter hire because of what he did at Vanderbilt. And if you look at 1 year and you pick out the worst year of anybody, it's not going to be very good. So I'm fine with it and anxious to see what he does in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who isn't crazy about the hire because they wanted, I know Dan Mullen's name was out there. He's going to be the head coach at UNLV. Craddock was a favorite of people, but not to take shots at anyone, I don't think a lot of people knew who Joe Craddock was until Bruce Feldman uttered his name on Big Noon Saturday a few weeks ago. So, Chip Lindsey, to me, I think is a very competent, safe hire, and I mean that complimentary. I think it's a pretty safe bet that this is going to work, and he's going to run some good stuff because he has a track record of doing so. And he wanted to bring in a guy who's shown that he can develop a young quarterback. He's worked with Jarrett Stidham. I think he recruited Bo Nix. Obviously Drake May was somewhat of a finished product when he got to North Carolina, but still had a pretty strong senior season, got drafted number 3 overall. I like it. He's got the pedigree of, I think before he got to North Carolina, 8 of the 11 offenses he coordinated finished in the top 30 in scoring. And then the last few years, the 7th best offense at North Carolina. Last season, 37th this past season. He comes from that. Everyone's wondering what's the connection? How did it kind of came out of left field? How did Sharon get connected with this guy? He's a Todd Monken guy. He's a Gus Malzahn guy, but specifically with Monken, was the offensive coordinator with the Baltimore Ravens. There's the John Harbaugh connection there. I wonder, and I'm willing to bet that probably had something to do with it. But yeah, I like it a lot. I think it's not a, we talk about hiring guys that you're not winning the press conference or you're not just winning the PR battle. I think this, with the tools that he'll have available to him, namely with the number 1 overall recruit in the country over the next few years. Listen, I mean, I don't need to win headlines. I don't need to win off-season championships. You just need to get better on the field. And this is a guy who has a history of dialing up some creative and explosive plays too. So I think it raises the floor incredibly. I don't know how high the ceiling will be, but I think that's going to depend on the caliber of players that they wind up bringing in here. But I'm pretty happy about it, for being honest.
Yeah, and I think that the last 2 years at North Carolina were interesting to me and pretty encouraging because in 2023 you had Drake May, and he wasn't as good then under Chip Lindsey as he was under Phil Longo the year before. Phil Longo ends up leaving, going to Wisconsin, and ended up getting fired mid-year this year. But Drake May was much more productive under Longo than he was under Lindsey, but he still was really efficient, put up big numbers, becomes a first-round NFL draft pick, looks really promising already for the New England Patriots. But then this past year, the first game of the season, that Thursday night game ahead of week 1, a lot of us were watching. Max Johnson, their quarterback, goes down, breaks his leg, tough deal to watch. And they kind of pieced it together, and they had a better run game this year than they did the year before. So he was able to adapt to what his personnel, what the strengths were of the guys on his team. I think we're going to see, some differences though between clearly what Michigan has done in the past and what Michigan will do in the future. It'll be interesting to see what that mix looks like, because you do have an offensive head coach in Sharon Moore. But I think he's going to bring in more of a spread look. It's going to be a little bit different. I think they're going to clearly pass the ball more than Michigan did, maybe even when Michigan had J.J. McCarthy. I think those numbers will be higher. So your guys' thoughts, I guess, on what this offense could look like. It's very early, and it'll be interesting to see like what they talk about, what the things are that they're stressing with the players. And one of the more fun things about covering new assistant coaches is talking to the players about what they're like and what they're asking out of their guys. But your early impressions on what this could look like.
The run game is always going to be big as long as Sharon Moore is here. So I don't think they will use it as a crutch as much as they have in the past. I think that with Bryce Underwood there in the next couple of years, we're going to see a much improved passing game. And I think that's one of the reasons that Lindsey's here. And I think that's what Sharon Moore wanted to see as well. A guy who's coached a couple of 3,500-yard passers, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty damn incredible. So it's the rare quarterback that gets to 3,000 at Michigan. So I'll be excited to see it, as long as they don't throw, they're not throwing 60 passes. As long as they don't get soft like Ohio State, for example, right? You stick to the run game and make sure that that's your bread and butter still, and that you can go to that whenever you want to. And at the same time, do some things for a quarterback that has skills like Bryce Underwood, who can run and throw. I fully expect him to know what to do with the tools that he has. So, and they got to put better tools around him too. Let's be clear. The offensive line needs to be better, flat out. He needs wide receivers. So we're confident they're working on that in the portal right now. That is something that's going to be imperative, to not just have a quarterback with no receivers, or receivers, no quarterback, or I'm confident in the running game, but you got to have a better offensive line too. So they still have a lot of work to do in the portal to get this thing where it needs to be next year, no matter who's the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's encouraging in the portal right now. A lot of the guys that we're seeing emerge as targets are big wide receivers, which I think is a huge need for them. But aside from that, when you go back and you do a bit of a deep dive, I think the thing that strikes me about Lindsey is that he's worked in a lot of different offenses. I think he came up through the high school ranks as an air raid guy, and then you work for Gus Malzahn, and you're kind of a power spread guy. And I think that's probably some of what's coming, that power spread type of stuff. You're going to see a lot of the inside, outside zone runs. You're going to see the bubble screens, which I know fans are annoyed with bubble screens because they didn't work this year, but they'll work if you have wide receivers that can block it, guys that can make plays in space. But I think that he's, just watching a couple, and there's not this laundry list of interviews and him at a chalkboard or things like that. But, you listen to the guy talk, and he seems pliable from a mentality standpoint, which I think is, what Michigan likes. I think that's something they emphasized on both sides of the ball post-COVID, when it comes to being multiple in what you do, being versatile in what you do. So I think that, like, Sharon Moore is going to set the tone for what he wants this offense to be. But you don't bring in a guy like Chip Lindsey with a long track record if you don't want some of the things that he's pulled from in the past to be there. So I think those are some of the things I expect to see. I think ultimately it comes down to, like I said before, the caliber of talent that they have here. And, we've talked about this before too, and Chris just sort of hit on it. When you have an offensive line that can control the line of scrimmage, you get to set the terms however you want to play a game. You're able to do that. So a lot of work still to do, but, people asking, why haven't they been more aggressive in the portal? Why isn't this? Why isn't that? First of all, the portal's been open for 3 days, and you've had an offensive coordinator. You don't even officially have an offensive coordinator yet. Hasn't been announced by the university. It seems like he is their guy, though, and will be their guy. So I think that once you have that piece in place, you start to evaluate. You can start building things out through the portal. he's going to not going to be on the, I don't know if he'll be on the sidelines for the bowl game. He's not going to call plays. That'll be Steve Kasula, but he kind of gets to like sit there and evaluate what the operation currently looks like. And I like that too. So we'll see what happens, but I think those are some of the things you'll see come to the offense.
Yeah. If you want to run a lot of power too, you might as well bring 44 back, Max Bredesen. We're
Please.
10 plus minutes in. We haven't mentioned Max Bredesen's name. It feels like we have to every show. And
did you guys go back? Did you go back and watch that play that I was talking about on the orgy run? A play or two before, Bredesen was getting into it and he was abusing Sonny Styles, the Ohio State safety, right? And having words with him. They were getting in each other's face. And Styles was so focused on getting Bredesen back from the edge that he didn't even pay attention to his responsibility on the edge. And Orgy goes right around him while Styles is engaged with Bredesen because Bredesen's in his head. I want that kid back another year. I can't wait to see him back in the winged helmet. Make him a priority. Sharon Moore.
That play is absolutely hilarious because
loved it.
He basically doubled up on a gap with Caleb Downs, who was already there.
Yep.
Orgy goes running around him, and we can't forget Sonny Styles, who was the guy who took a bad angle on Blake Corum on the touchdown run the year before when he was a safety, and Blake Corum breaks the tie and takes the lead for Michigan after a 17-17 right after the Zinter injury. So tough look there. There's those one or two plays. It's like Michigan always seems to now make those plays, and Ohio State hasn't been able to. But Bredesen is one of those guys that on pretty much every good, positive run play this year, he wasn't in on all of them, of course. That position's a little bit different. But when he's been in, he's done his job, and not just done his job, but as good as anyone can do it. He's up for the Low Man trophy presented by Pardon My Take as the best fullback in the country. So, yeah, getting him back would be huge, especially for this offense. If you're going to run this style, I think that having Max Bredesen would be really, really big.